Greetings and welcome back to LA Quill. When readers step into a fantasy story, they're not simply looking for spectacle. They're not just here for magic systems or epic battles or sprawling maps filled with mysterious names. What they're truly searching for, whether they realize it or not, is a world that feels alive, a world that breathes, a world that exists beyond the page, even if the story is not actively focused on it. That kind of world lingers in the imagination, and it's not built on surface details alone. It's not created through lists of kingdoms or timelines of rulers. It's built through layers, through intention, through texture, through the quiet understanding that a world is more than its geography. It is the people who inhabit it, the beliefs they carry, and the invisible forces that shape their lives. One of the most common starting points for writers is the map. There's something undeniably satisfying about sketching out continents and mountain ranges and rivers that carve their way into the land. But here's the truth. Readers don't fall in love with maps. They fall in love with the lives lived within them. Instead of beginning with geography, begin with culture. Ask yourself what your people believe. What do they fear when the sun goes down? What do they celebrate when the harvest comes in? What stories are whispered to children to keep them safe or to keep them obedient? Culture gives shape to everything else. A harsh desert might create a people who value water above all else, who speak of it with reverence, who build entire systems of trust and betrayal around its control. A coastal kingdom might measure time not in days, but in tides, their lives dictated by the pull of the sea. When you understand how your people see the world itself begins to take on meaning. The mountains are no longer just mountains. They are sacred barriers, or ancient prisons, or the bones of forgotten gods. Geography becomes a reflection of culture, rather than a backdrop for it. And once you have the culture, you begin to hear voices. Language is one of the most powerful tools you have for making a world feel real. Not in the sense of constructing entire languages, though you can if that's your passion. Most of us are never going to do that. But there are subtle ways that people speak that we can use. The phrases they use, the metaphors they lean on, the blessings they offer and the curses they mutter under their breath. A single line of dialogue can reveal an entire worldview. If a traveler says, "May your road be kind," you already know something about the dangers they expect. If a merchant says, "Fortune flows like a river," you may begin to sense the rhythms of their culture. Language isn't just communication. It's a window into what matters. But no world exists without a past. Even if your story never directly explores it, history should live beneath the surface of everything you write. Wars leave scars. Empires rise and fall. Betrayals echo through generations. These things shape how people think, how they trust, and how they fear. You don't need to explain all of it. In fact, you probably shouldn't. What matters is that the past leaves traces. Subtle, sometimes barely noticeable, but always present. A crumbling wall that no one repairs. A festival whose origin no one fully remembers. A family that refuses to speak a certain name. These things are the fingerprints of history. And when your world remembers where it has been, it begins to feel like it has truly lived, like it really exists. But not everything in a world is grand. In fact, one of the most powerful ways to ground a fantasy setting is to pay attention to the ordinary, the small everyday details that are so easy to overlook. Where do people get their food? Who mends their clothing? What do they do when they're not fighting wars or chasing destiny? A soldier worrying about the state of his boots can tell us more about the reality of a campaign than any description of strategy or politics. A baker waking before dawn, kneading dough in a quiet kitchen, reminds us that life continues even in the shadow of something larger. These mundane details are not distractions, they're anchors. And within those everyday moments, belief finds its place. Every world, no matter how small, has something sacred. It may be a pantheon of gods, each with their own domain and influence. It may be a handful of old stories passed down through generations. Or it might be something quieter, a superstition, a ritual, a shared understanding that certain places or moments hold meaning beyond the visible. Belief shapes behavior. It influences how people make decisions, how they justify their actions, how they cope with loss or celebrate victory. It weaves itself into politics, into family life, into the way individuals understand their place in the world. And the most powerful part of that belief doesn't need to be proven to be real. It only needs to be believed. Now, with all those layers in place, culture, language, history, daily life, belief, you might feel the temptation to explain it all to your audience, to make sure your readers understand every nuance, every connection, every carefully crafted detail. Resist that temptation. World building is not something you present to your readers. It's something you reveal. Let your characters interact with their world in ways that feel natural. Let them move through it without pausing to explain it. A child placing a small offering at a roadside shrine tells us more than pages of description ever could. A casual argument over tradition hints at deeper cultural divides without needing a lecture. Trust your readers. Give them pieces and let them assemble the whole. And then it's fantasy, so we've got to talk about magic, don't we? Magic is often the centerpiece of fantasy, but it's also one of the easiest ways to break immersion, if you don't handle it right. Power without limits feels hollow. It removes tension. It dissolves consequence. For magic to feel real, it needs boundaries. It needs cost. That cost could be physical, emotional, spiritual, maybe something a little bit more abstract, but it has to exist. When a character pays a price for power, that power gains weight. It becomes something the readers can understand, something they can believe in. A spell that leaves a mage trembling, drained, or marked in some lasting way will always feel more grounded than one cast without effort or consequence. And even with rules in place, your world should never feel perfect. Perfection is sterile. It lacks the friction that makes life interesting. Real worlds are messy. They're filled with contradictions, traditions that persist long after their purpose has been forgotten, laws that are ignored, tensions that simmer just beneath the surface. There are also cultural clashes, political struggles, systems that don't quite work the way they were supposed to, people who bend the rules, and people who suffer because of the people who bent the rules. These imperfections are not flaws in your world building. They're proof that your world is alive. Because life itself is not clean or orderly. It's layered, contradictory, and constantly changing. And that's the heart of it. A world that feels real is not one that is fully explained. It's one that feels as though it could continue to exist after the story ends. It has laughter echoing through crowded taverns and whispers drifting through narrow alleyways and stories unfolding in corners the reader never sees. It has depth, it has memory, and it has weight. And most importantly, it invites the reader to stay. World building is not something you complete in a single draft. It's a process, a gradual layering of ideas, details, and decisions. Each choice adds texture. Each revision adds clarity. Over time, what once felt like a collection of concepts becomes something cohesive and something tangible. So give yourself permission to build slowly, to refine, to revisit, to let your world evolve alongside your story. Because the goal is not perfection, the goal is life. And that's our tale from LA Quill today. What's a fantasy world that has stayed with you long after you finished the story? And what made it feel so real? Until next time, may your stories always be magical.